Something that I'm trying to work out in my mind right now relates to a testament. What's the word for it? Like one of those little things that Christians read from day to day. And Bobby Schuller released one today that was entitled, I think it was "Love is Not Idolatry." And you know, it sort of it was striking to me to see it because you know, it's something that had been on my mind in particular lately, and I've just always hated the way within Christian circles sometimes people imply that falling in love with somebody is always idolatrous, that if you have strong feelings or strong attachment to someone, it's always idolatry. And so when they find out that somebody's, upset over a breakup or something like that, they tend to sort of be like, well, you're just upset because you're idolizing them. And, I've always hated that behavior. I've always hated that philosophy. One of, a guy that once rejected me sort of rejected me with words like, to the effect of, I don't think there's room for God in this relationship, just because I expressed strong attachment and strong attraction to him, and that made me very upset. So, when I saw that Bobby Schuller had published something with that title, I was expecting him to simply argue with that idea and say, well, no, if you look at the Bible, we're actually encouraged to feel strongly attached and strongly attracted to the people that we love. But he actually, when I went to read what he had written, it was very similar, for the most part, to the things people typically write about how when we are in relationships, it can be tempting to overly idealize people and then idolize them, and this is unhealthy. But he took it in a different direction, in that he pointed out that when we idealize people this way, when we have them up on this pedestal, we give them a place to fall. And don't get me wrong, there are texts that talk about this as well, how you don't want to idealize the people that you love because it means that you end up being disappointed in them. But even then, I've always felt like this is, it's not untrue, but it's sort of incomplete, because I think regardless of how you perceive your partner, if they do something that you find hurtful, you're still going to feel hurt. There's no way to avoid that, and there's no real mindset. I think it's very hard to adopt a mindset where you won't feel that way, where you won't feel hurt by somebody ever, and yet you'll still have a healthy level of attachment to them, I think. Although I could be wrong. I'm still nutting these things out. But what I found most striking was the way he ended the piece by saying that when people fall off the pedestal we have them on, let us not idealize them so that we can still love them even after they've fallen off the pedestal. And this was striking to me because I had always understood people who were telling me to get over somebody who had hurt me, or to, because a lot of the time when I told people that someone had hurt me, they'd be like, well, just dump them, just move on and be with somebody else. And, as though the only reason I'd stay after that point of them hurting me is if I was idolizing them. And, but Bobby Schuller's entry there gave me food for thought. Quite, and I have to take him seriously because he does apparently have a healthy marriage, so I would have to surmise that he knows something about relationships. And I take him very seriously because he comes across as so emotionally intelligent in the things he has to say. And, so I had to ask myself, all these years when I've felt obligated and pressured to be really upset with people after they'd hurt me, in this effort to try to not idolize them and to try to treat them as a person, have I been doing the exact opposite? Have I been making them into an idol by placing, this dynamic upon them? And, I'm still having to think it through because, yeah, I mean, not only is it an uncomfortable thing to think about, but also, yeah, it's one of those things where because it's a new idea to me, because it's so removed from what I'm used to thinking about the subject, I really have to think about it. But, you know, it made me notice that when I am trying to get over someone, I have this tendency to feel like the only way to get over them is to try to demonize them in my mind, to try to convince myself and sort of try to brainwash myself into believing that they are a monster or that they're a horrible person. And I, I had faced a lot of a lot of social pressure in my life to feel that, that getting over somebody who particularly somebody who has hurt your feelings necessarily means thinking about them this way. And I mean, it doesn't unilaterally apply. For a long time I've talked about the ex I had and how I wish, he and I could still be friends because, he made an important mark on my life. But, it's, yeah, it means that I have to rethink the way I get over people, perhaps. In that I have to stop maybe thinking that my job when I'm trying to get over somebody is to try to hate them, rather to get them off the pedestal and to just see them as human. And it it's a little bit sort of I'm trying to find the word for it, creepy, a little bit uncanny that I should run into that particular that particular post by Bobby Schuller, like the morning after, I had that situation of finding that picture of the guy from last year and just being like, well, yeah, he's just a person. And I guess sort of realizing that who he was on paper and in person was, not necessarily the same person I was in love with. Like, the person I was in love with was probably like just an idea that I had of him in my head. And I guess seeing the image sort of brought that into much sharper focus where, yeah, I mean, admittedly, it's a particularly unflattering picture of him, and he never photographed well. But, I mean, the fact is that the idea I had of him in my head was sufficiently removed from who he really was that it took me a while to actually recognize that that was a drawing of him and not just like some random redneck or something. And, yeah, it I really, really, like, in my head I'm thinking, I really, really hope the trajectory God has me on is not one where I'm somehow forced to go and deal with this guy again, because just the amount of distress I've had to go through just dealing with all of this has just been enormous. Like, it's been the hardest rejection I've ever had to go through. And there are, I mean, one would argue that a lot of those reasonings have nothing to do with his and everything to do with where I was psychologically when all of this happened, and where I, to a lesser extent where I am now, where I'm still learning a lot, and I still have a lot to learn, I think. But, I mean, I've made a lot of progress, and that's something to be happy about. I'm still happy about that, but oh boy. Like, I really, really don't want to be in a situation where, nightmare situation. Like this is the worst case scenario I can imagine. Somehow or other, against my will, I end up running into him at some event with friends where I'm not expecting him to turn up, just like what happened about a year ago. And, once again, he's looking at me like he's attracted to me, and, at first I'll have my resolve and think, yeah, no, I know I've been here before, this is just gonna hurt me again, and then I'll get attached again. And then, so I'll like try to talk to him again, and I'll just end up getting knocked back and having this conscious awareness that the whole time he's not talking to me, he's talking to his Discord friends instead, and just feeling really, really cut up. And, admittedly, the reason that traumatized me so much was that I back then lived with the assumption that you can somehow measure the quality or meaningfulness of all of your relationships solely by, looking at how often you message each other, which I've come to think is a bit, it's a bit totalizing and a bit overly simplistic. But more importantly, I think it comes from this place of having to assume that all of your relationships have to be evaluated in the first place. Like, as if human dynamics are this numbers game where everybody's having to compete for relative worth. And I don't really believe in that, and, I used to believe in that back then, that a woman could only have as much worth as her relationships did, but I don't believe in that anymore. I actually believe that it's not a zero-sum game, and that actually it's possible to have many different types of very important, very valuable relationships in your life. And that, yeah. And also, he's off the pedestal insofar as I used to believe that he had the right to tell me what I was worth to some degree. I used to believe that because he was so smart and so accomplished and so talented, and, that he had so many friends, that it somehow inherently meant he was so much better than me that he had a right to assess my worth. Which, again, is ridiculous. It's so untrue. Like, no, human worth has to be inherent, because if it's not inherent, you can justify murder. Like, if you extrapolate the logic out, like, you can justify just killing some people and not others if you really believe that human worth is that much up for debate. So, setting aside the fact that, everything that happened made it very clear to me that you can have all of those things. You can be a white man who's tall and thin and can eat anything and still be thin, and be able to play an instrument and have lots of friends and have lots of acquaintances and, all of these amazing things, and still be, and still lie, and still, not just lie, but lie in a really, in a way that really, places other people at peril, and you can still make, you can still sneer at people like you think you're better than them. Like, that's one of the things, though. I tend to think that good people aren't people who have material worth, that they're good people, that they're good people because they're kind. I've changed that insofar as, how I value, what I think is a true accomplishment. And so again, faced with him in person, I don't think I would necessarily respond the way I did. In that I wouldn't be necessarily giving him the same level of power over me anymore anyway. It still hurts to think of the fact that I had such a high opinion of him, and that I wanted him as much as I did, and then had to completely lose him to someone else. That part still hurts. But, why wouldn't it? Realistically, nobody likes being rejected. Like, you can do a lot to make it not hurt as much. And it doesn't have to, like, super cane when it does happen if you view it realistically and remember that it's not really an evaluation of your worth as a person. But if it's somebody you're really into, somebody you really, really think is the one, and then it blows up in your face in such an extreme way as it did for me too. Because he had so many instances where he could have handled things respectfully with me, and he didn't seize them. That's and insofar as you could say, well, he's just human, he's just making mistakes. He could have helped me to understand what was going on in his head, but he didn't lift a finger. If anything, it almost seemed as if he was going out of his way to antagonize me in some cases. But in any case, even then you could toll that up to humanity, because arguably there were moments where I was antagonizing him right back. Or in this vain effort to protect my own feelings and my own pride, and to try to do what society seemed to deem appropriate and hate somebody who had hurt me. But yeah, it is a bit weird how within Christian circles people talk as though you have to love your neighbor and forgive no matter what, but then suddenly, as soon as the topic of romantic relationships come up, Christians often start saying the same things that worldly people do, in that they'll still give advice like, oh, if he's not calling you within such a number of hours of you messaging him, he's a creep and he's a scoundrel and you should drop him like a hot potato, and all of this silly nonsense, which is so totalizing, and it assumes so much about what the other person is thinking, instead of actually just communicating with them and finding out what they think and what they want, and I the feeling I'm having right now is just, yeah, this is happening, but my life is still a good life. Like, I don't have to feel like crap just because something bad happened to me. Like right now, I can go read my book, I can have a nice nap, I can keep watching Kath and Kim, I could go and listen to another sermon, I can do all sorts of things right now, and I used to believe that if somebody rejected me or dumped me, that I wasn't allowed to be happy. But that's not true either. I can just go and do things that make me feel good, and I'm allowed to feel good, and I'm allowed to feel happy. And other people, who are trying to make me feel guilty or sad about where my life is, they're wrong. I get to tell them that they're wrong, because all of those things they're trying to have, or trying to tell me that I'm a bad person for not having, those are just ways of being happy. And if you can be happy where you are, then you've beat them at their own game. I think, if you're happy where you are, you don't really need all that other stuff. It's totally extraneous to the purpose. And people could argue, well, what about serving God? Well, I can serve God right now. I'm serving God right now. I'm doing all these charity things. I've quit sugar, and I'm tomorrow I'm gonna try to run another. Oh, well, I probably won't run tomorrow. I'll probably just go to some air-conditioned place and do star jumps instead, because I think the weather's going to be too hot for me to run outside safely. But, the point is, I have things I can do right now, like today or tomorrow, that will, that will be worth something. And I don't need... That's the thing. Even if this guy... Even if I was still in love with the guy from last year, and even if he was totally just sitting in his room thinking, Shona is the biggest turd in the universe, F her, and I'm gonna screw every woman on earth just to break her heart a million times. Like, even if he was thinking that, and I don't think he is, but even if he was, all these awesome things about my life don't stop being true. They keep on being true anyway, because God doesn't change. God still provides good things to the people he loves, and he loves everybody. So, why should I care if one poopy head doesn't appreciate me,